become is also very easy.
And also we have to
for the purpose to to access anything, but it is just to execute your JUnits. When you write any test cases, you need to load some data. Instead of referring a physical database, Spring Framework refers to access in memory database. That is a part of JUnit framework. So as part of the JUnit framework, Spring Framework will give you a in-memory database, but that will not be useful for us. Only for JUnits. Getting me right? So in memory. So on the fly it will construct and then it will destroy. But the database, what we really uses in the real world is we need a physical database, because we want to check each and everything in the database aspects as well. Because ultimately for a clients, what is required is data. The data is very important rather than your applications for them, because they will care about the data. If your data is coming and going in on the fly, it will not be useful in the real world. Okay.
Yeah. When we are using Maven, we got two cases, right? One is app.java, another one is test.java. So that test.java, we have to manually write all the test cases. Suppose we wrote a program, we write a program to concatenate the string. Okay, we'll take the string as input and we'll concatenate and then show the output. So in that test.java, we have to write all the test cases possible, right?
Exactly.
So that we have to manually do, or Maven will automatically create that.
You have to do manually. No, there is no any other approaches and everything. So we have to do manually. Okay, so we don't have any built-in support, and so everything should be done in manual. Okay. All right. So moving on, into the Spring DAO, that is your JDBC module. And if you look at here a diagram, so which will describe you how much a developer has to work on and how much Spring is going to be supporting for us. Okay, just have a look at. I'm also trying to read about this sentence. The value add provided by Spring Framework JDBC abstraction is perhaps best shown by the sequence of actions outlined in the below. So this table shows what actions Spring will take care of and which actions are the responsibility of you, that is your application developer. Okay, so if you look at, as I said, Spring is going to perform most of the operations. Okay, the only thing is which is mandatory, cannot performed by the Spring Framework, only that will be performed by the developer. So that is us. So, and here if you see, Spring is one column and U is one column, and the action what we are performing is in another column. So define connection parameters means, so what is the username and URL, a password of the database is doesn't known by Spring Framework, because that is you have to decide. So, and that should be given by the developer. And opening of the connection is responsible by Spring Framework. So once if you have provided, and the opening of the connection and giving you the connection back is responsible by Spring Framework. You don't need to write any additional code for that. And specify the SQL statements, because after connecting the database successfully, what query that you want to execute, it's purely choice chosen by the developer, right? So you want to insert, update, delete, and which scenarios what you want to execute should be chosen by developer, not by the framework. So, and that's why, so this is also should be selected by and should be written by the developer. And for that SQL statement, if it is required any parameter, suppose we want to insert a record into the database, or we want to register a user. When you want to register a user, you need to write a insert command. So when you are writing a insert command, and you should supply all the input params required for that input statements, right? And that all we will mention as part of the so parameter. So declare all the params and then supply it. Prepare and execute the statements, and again that will be done by Spring Framework, because the execution, preparing, and setting up the params and everything will be automatically done by Spring Framework. And set up the loop for to iterate the results, so that is also will done by Spring Framework. And do the work for each iteration. After getting the each result, where you want to display will be choice for the developer. Okay, once if it is done, if there is any exception during this whole process, will be controlled by Spring Framework. And it also handles the built-in transaction management, and you don't need to write any special transactions. And closing of the connection, closing of the statement, prepare statement, result set object, all will be responsible by Spring Framework. So the overall understanding, if you see, the number of actions performing by the programmer and number of actions performing by the Spring is, so comparatively, if you see, a developers write a less code, but Spring Framework internally performs the more the operations. That's what, in simple words, Spring Framework mainly avoids the boilerplate of the code. So exactly if you represent the same thing in J2EE JDBC, so what will happen really? In JDBC, all the steps you should be responsible, and nobody come forward for to support all this, right? And that's why we are learning a Spring, because of with the several benefits. Make sense?
Srini, open the connection means is Spring is going to maintain connection pool for us.
Exactly. So it by default maintains the database connection pool. Okay, just your responsibility to supply the required connection parameters. I'll show you that practically. So the moment so that you provided, okay, the connection parameters, it will automatically opens with the connection, and it will give you the connection pool. From the connection pool, and it will share you one of the connection. Make sense? Okay. So, and as I said, so how we are simplifying the code using Spring Framework. So as I said, so they are providing some built-in template classes, and using those classes, so we can simplify our job. So the most popular class in Spring JDBC is, the name of the class is called JDBC template is a class. So this class will be used, okay, for to perform all the operations required for the database, whatever the operations that you want, and insert, update, select, delete, okay, and so and what else, like, so any operations that you want, you can perform using JDBC template. So single class which has all the features for to support. Okay, so the most of the scenarios, situations, so we will use this class. Okay, and there is also another, okay, child class for JDBC template. Okay, so that is named parameter JDBC template class. So basically, you know, right, named parameters means in case of prepared statement, it will accept the question marks. Wherever the question marks are accepted, you need to replace the named parameters. In the runtime, you have to change the question mark should be as a placeholder should be replaced by some parameter, right? So that can be done using named parameter JDBC template. Of course, that also can be done using JDBC template. Okay, so likewise you have so they are the benefits. Okay, And you also have something called simple JDBC insert, simple JDBC call. So these two are for optimize the metadata for to limit the amount of necessary configurations. This approach simplifies the coding that you only need to be provide the name of table or procedure to provide the map of parameters for returning the columns. This only works if the database provides the adequate metadata. If the database does not provide any metadata, you have to provide explicit configuration of parameters. Usually we don't use this is very often, very frequently, very less usage. The only class which we use is to perform all the database operations in the real world is JDBC template class. Okay, so this class is fair enough to handle all the typical situations can be also handled by this class. So now let's go ahead and then see here. So how you can write, okay, how you can get the class. And so here is the code which they have written sample examples also how you can get it. Simply, I will show you, okay, here in this document, they have not showed you how to build the JDBC template class. So, okay, so here if you see, simply once if your JDBC template object is ready, once if you prepared, just call template.query for object. Suppose I want to get the number of count of the records. So simply select count star from actor. If you call, so the count of actors will be written. And if you want only one column and you don't need to write a result set object, okay, and you don't need to write a prepared statement, and you don't need to write a statement dot execute query method, so you don't need to use, okay, lot of code so that you can avoid using one line of code directly you are getting a row count. That's the beauty of JDBC template class. And I said, okay, named parameters also can be, okay, applied here. Here is the best example. So here we are getting all the actors, but I want to get the actors list whose first name is matching with this question mark, and that value I can supply later on. That is also can be done using JDBC template. And you don't need to make your SQL statements or static SQL. You can make your SQLs or dynamic SQLs, right? And so here is the single value if you want to pass. Suppose like this, if you have multiple question marks, you can also pass array of values by just, okay, pass. And in the case of prepared statement, you need to remember each and every index of the question mark, then you need to specify the index. And here you don't need to be bothered about the index. Just if you pass the array of value, it will automatically consider and then it will set it, right? So these are all the several, okay, benefits. And suppose I want to get an object, like if you are aware of the Hibernate, what it will do. So the moment if you write find one, Hibernate will return you the object employee. Suppose if you are writing a employee, it will return whole data in terms of object. So the same thing is also possible here using a concept called row mapper. Using row mapper, you can map entire data into your object and then return it in one line, so would be suffice to handle this. Okay, likewise you have several, okay, examples are provided as part of this. Okay, I'll show you everything in terms of practically we will look at. So here if you see, if you want to really insert, update, delete, here is the examples. Okay, so one method which allows to perform all the various operations. JDBC template.update is a method which performs both insert, update, delete operations, including dynamic parameter supply. Right? So even if you want to execute any DDLs, okay, any DDLs if you want to execute, the DDLs also can be executed using Spring Okay, so by using a method called execute method. Okay, and if you want to call any database stored procedures, if you want to call, just as update is the method which is enough to even call the stored procedures. So in case of J2EE JDBC, you have to change in each and every specific query. If you are executing, then the code has to be changed. But when it comes to the Spring framework, so this is not confusing the developers, right? So here is my common method. You can call all the time. I know internally how to handle it. So everything is going to be taken care by Spring framework rather than by the developer. Make sense? And so here is the couple of best practices which they have shared, and you can also look at from this documentation. Make sense? Okay, and so as I said, so here is the okay. Usually if you want to get any data sources, right, either we will use Apache provided data source, okay, or so like this. So we will write the data sources, which is your connection pool. And when it comes to the Spring framework, and you don't need to write any so you don't need to depending on any server containers. Okay, you can prepare your own data source. You can prepare your own data source by using Spring framework. I'm just looking at if they have used anywhere in this document. Okay, so we have something called driver manager data source. Is the built-in class, and it will provide you as a connection pool. Just you need to supply the required parameters. You can look at this document, has all the information. Okay, yeah, database connections. Here is your data source. Yeah, exactly. This is what the replacement of your other connection pooling classes. You don't need to depending on any servers. Even in the standalone application also you can use the connection pooling. Spring is providing a built-in class. The name of the class called driver manager data source. Driver manager data source is a built-in class which is given you in the DAO module. So as part of the JDBC, you can access a direct data source. You know, data source means it provides the connection pooling, right? So, and this data source can be used to build your JDBC template class. I'll show you that how you can do. And for two, okay, bootstrap this the driver manager data source and get it. The data source connection is ready. You need to just supply these parameters. One is driver class name, URL, username and password. So if you supply all these params, so driver class name, URL, username and password, if you supply, that's all, and your connection will be ready and you can access it in anywhere in the application.
What is that JDBC.properties?
What is that? So here, if you see here, I don't want to hard code the URLs. I don't want to hard code the URLs. What you can simply do, yesterday I have explained you, if you remember, you can use a property placeholder. So you can use a property file. Using property file, you can dynamically read the data from the properties file, and so these are all the placeholders. So these are all the property keys, and then so you can, it will be replaced in the runtime.
And this driver manager data source class, does it support multiple databases like Sybase, Oracle, and some other?
Exactly.
If you can.
Exactly. It supports to all other databases.
So whatever means it's
Because
independent of
because internally it uses the native JDBC only. That is your driver manager. Your driver manager, if supports to those databases, it supports to all other databases.
Okay, it's independent of databases. Means whatever the URL and all the things you'll pass, it will take it and
Exactly.
process it.
Exactly. Whatever the JDBC code you have written, as long as your JDBC vendor is providing the driver for us, then our code is ready to connect to their database, and we don't have any limitation to connecting Sybase or DB2 or Oracle PostgreSQL. It doesn't matter. So it will connect to all other databases. Only thing which we require is we require a driver from the JDBC vendors. Okay, so I think that's the pretty much what we will be going to be playing in a practical, right? So JDBC is very simple to perform all the herd operations. So we'll try to perform all these different operations, and we'll also try to build some applications. So we'll see. So any questions, and before we jump into the practical? Okay, sounds good. Looks like no questions. And yeah.
Hello. Can we add multiple database here?
Why not? Yes. You need to just repeat your this bean class.
No, in the
This
same
bean.
bean class.
So the one data source is for MySQL and another data source is for Oracle.
Okay, in the same configuration.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And so whenever if you access the bean ID bean ID is data source Oracle, and you will get the Oracle connection. Whenever you access data source MySQL, you will get the MySQL.
Yeah, it will pick the bean ID and then categorize. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So moving on, so into our STS. Okay. And so what I'll do, and we are already very much familiar how do we write a Spring application. Okay.
Srini, one more question.
Yes, go ahead.
In terms of performance, how means see, because this internal Spring framework is doing most of the things are internally. So how we can calculate performance for this? Because in production application we need lots of performance and all. So if let's say I've deployed an application with using this data source and all, so it's internal things. Some of the things taking the data source and processing it. But if the client asks us to, for make this application means like get the performance, then how we have to tune that on? Yeah, so that is the question.
So if you look at the overall performance, writing by the developer using JDBC and writing the overall performance using by Spring framework, and what I feel is okay, and this performance the better, okay, because you don't know how programmer is, how frequently he is releasing the connections, how frequently he is releasing the result set object statements connections. If programmer is missed, so those are all still remains the same, and that will degrade the performance. But here, so what will happen is, so framework will make sure that whatever has been written, framework is responsible. It will make sure that so it will release all the resources, and from that standpoint, yes, it will increase the performance of the application. And the second point is, whatever we are queries which we are writing, we are not translating into any another language, right? Only thing is what we are doing is we are they have, as part of this framework, they have written a common methods which is internally going to perform the same code whatever we have written in J2EE JDBC. The same code will be written internally, but only thing is we are avoiding the repeated lines of the code in the Spring JDBC. In terms of the performance aspect, so you don't see any huge difference using JDBC, because ultimately still you are writing native SQLs only. Even in JDBC also you will write the same thing, and that is what the only one level of API for us to connect the database. And when it comes to the Hibernate, there is a huge performance difference.
Okay. Actually, one time I was processing around 10 to 20 GB of file and parsing it and putting into database. So that time I use contain method while processing the data, XML data. So there also means like I'm using some map and then checking whether the key is there or not. It contains the key and all. Then I'll process the data and store it in database. So that time contain method was taking lots of time to process, means like checking and all.
Which contains method?
Because again the 10 GB data. Sorry.
Which contains methods are you are looking?
Contains method. Hash map.
Okay, you
That
have
we are
hash
checking
map. You
contains key or
also
something
have.
like that.
Go ahead.
So we are checking contents using content method. So that also having some performance issue. So in Spring as well, we are using some map, set, and list in using that XML, right? In Spring configuration XML. One thing is that, so means how it behave in that case.
Okay, so when
Is
it
it
comes
going,
to,
because it's
yeah,
going to use default size map.
that's what I'm saying. Okay,
So that one,
the overall comparison, if you look at the overall comparison of your JDBC application, the same application, if it is migrated to Spring JDBC, if you look at the overall production comparison, the performance, I don't think so there is a huge difference. There might be a minor difference, but which is not considerable. Yeah, I think you can say, I can say that you can ignore that, because so you don't say that a huge performance impact using Spring framework, because so we are going to be utilizing a common features, and we are making sure that so we are using a concept of singleton objects, so which will also increase your application performance. But only thing is, whatever you are using in Spring, you have to use effectively. So if you are writing a code in effectively, so compared to your JDBC application, yes, the performance of Spring JDBC, especially I'm speaking about. So this will improve your performance, not degrade the performance.
yeah, right. Because whenever the production team comes to us, client is like sitting on us, and he will not allow to go means till the performance will not increase. Like very tough to do the things, like means if like, because framework is handling all the things.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But okay, that's what.
Yeah.
So only thing is,
Yeah.
framework, when you have to think about is when if it is translating into the different sources, then only the challenges. But here we are not really translating anything, so we are you okay, they came up with the generalized code, and using that generalized code, so we are calling every time. Okay, the same thing you can also do using Spring framework, sorry, using in JDBC also. Okay, now with this start, so we can also write the same thing there. So it's a generalized code, and then you can call, and every time so you can use only one method, but in underlying of that method will performs every time whatever the operations you are writing, and you don't need to change every time. For update, if you're writing, so one line of code is different. So when you write to insert, so you don't need to write a different line of code. So when it comes to the delete, you don't need to write a different lines of code. Everything can be achieved so using a single method. Okay, so but what is my aspect is, so you don't see a very huge difference in terms of performance gap, but when it comes to the ORM frameworks, yes, you can see, because there is a lot of translation is required between your HQL queries, and then converting into the native SQL queries, then again executing, then populating into the objects, then getting the data back. So definitely you can see a difference over there. But so this type of the modules, I don't think so you can face any performance problem, because we have been implemented for a couple of applications. I don't see any impact on the application, or I don't see any my clients are in was uh, provided a feedback saying that not performing the up to the mark. So we don't have any that issues. Okay, so shall we build the application? So do you have some time? Shall we continue, or do you want to meet us in the next session? It's up to you guys.
We can continue.
So Ankit says
Hello.
next session. Okay.
We can
Yeah.
continue.
Okay. And Prashanti.
Yes, Srini.
Prashant, how about you?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, it's okay.
No. See, okay, if you are fine, then we can continue. Otherwise, no problem. Okay, for me to continue the next session.
Okay, Shani, we'll take this in next session only.
Next session. Okay. Next session we'll see.
All right. So the next session we will directly start with practical hands-on. So let's discuss that. Okay, coming session. All right. So that's it. Okay, that's it. I have a wonderful day to all of you and happy weekend. See you on the next session. And bye bye.